For our digital context asynchronous activity for week 8, we created it's actually a package that is meant as a lesson plan to be used for a grade 11 biology class. So for the SBI 3U course, this specific lesson, this video is going to go through the lesson and the resources that we will provide for the students to just kind of walk you through our vision of the lesson. So this, like I mentioned, it's for grade 11 university bio. The lesson is going to be on sex verification in sports. Specifically, this addresses strand D genetic processes. And in the sort of lesson plan document, you'll see the overall expectation and specific expectations that this lesson will address. So this lesson that we've thought of essentially has three components. It has an at-home component, which is a preparation, a in-class component. I'll just quickly scroll through here. An in-class component, and then finally another at-home follow-up component. So we'll go through this a little bit more in detail. So this lesson, just very briefly, going back to the expectations, we'll get students to look at understanding sort of chromosomal differences between male and female, getting them to really think about the concept of DNA, chromosomes, and genes, and how sort of different changes in meiosis would result in chromosomal changes that will be evident in the individual. So at home, first off, students are going to pick up a case study package perhaps the week before the lesson, giving them about a week or so to read through and understand this study at their own pace. So what we've done here, we've provided students with two sources of information. The first one is the Tucker and Collins 2009 paper called The Science and Management of Sex Verification in Sport. This is a published journal article. We feel that it gets the students, especially at the grade 11 university level, used to looking at a sort of research paper that they might encounter in first year university, and it sort of it throws them in there in a safe space that's sort of in high school before they go off to university. We also support that article with the Shapiro article on ESPN, which is a bit of an easier read. So I'll quickly just show you both of these articles here. So first, the Tucker and Collins paper. You can see here it's a review paper, so it's a little bit shorter, but it is a scientific paper. The wording is going to be quite difficult for the grade 11 student. So of course we'll encourage a student to go through it as much as they can, but we also have this sort of almost like a backup paper where it's written more in layman's term. It's a little bit easier to understand. It talks about the exact same case of this athlete named Santhi, and sort of how her experience and how her medal was stripped because her sex was questioned by the committee that awarded her the medal, and how she went on to cope with it. So we've provided students with these two different sources to look at essentially the same issue, which is sex verification in sports, verifying that females are in fact females so that females can compete in the female categories. So taking these two articles, students will then go on their own time to prepare two tasks in preparation for their classroom synchronous time together. So first, they are asked to prepare 5 open-ended discussion questions, because you'll soon see in class we will have a discussion component in which one of the students will take on the role as leader. These 5 questions will be collected at the end of class, at the end of the actual physical class, and it's used partially as assessment for learning, just for us to have an idea of sort of where they're coming from. So students are going to be picked at random during class time to take on this role of leader. So it is in their best interest for students to come to class prepared with these 5 open-ended discussion questions to encourage discussion. So secondly, students are also going to be asked to post on the discussion board on our Google Classroom that we've set up. So any questions that they have about the readings and topic before the class starts. So obviously we imagine that this is going to be quite an interesting topic for students, just in terms of is a female a female? How do you decide if someone is female? How do you decide if someone is male? We ask that students post at minimum 2 questions they have and engage in a discussion by responding to at least 2 other posts made by the peers before the day of the class. So again, this sort of goes back to assessment for learning in terms of for us to have an understanding of where they're coming from before we go into the actual lesson itself, but also sort of assessment of learning in terms of getting an idea of what they got out of the readings that we've provided, especially considering they're so academic in nature. So we have a note here for instructors that instructors may choose to provide thought-provoking questions to aid in this process if the students aren't sort of really going along with the discussion online quite as much. So we can ask questions such as, what will an XXY individual look like? How may you identify in your class someone who is an intersex individual? And what are sort of maybe the criterions that you use in your identification of these individuals? And what are some of the preconceptions that have gone into it? So for example, this gets students thinking about sort of, well, is it just based on physical characteristics that I'm deciding whether or not someone's male or female? And it gets them thinking about sort of the concept of genetics and different factors that goes into constructing the identity, a person's gender identity. So these are what the students will do before coming into class. Then during class, we will start off with a short 5-minute quiz. This is just to assess the comprehension of the articles that they read, as well as the key scientific concepts. So we want them to understand sort of the basic stuff in terms of genetics. A male should have an XY chromosome, a female should have an XX chromosome, things like that. So this would just be short 5 to 6 multiple choice questions, true or false questions, just for us as educators to get an idea of, well, have they read the papers? And then we'll go on to 40 minutes. We'll go on to a 40-minute in-class presentation / guided discussion. So we're going to start off going through some of the key points from the article with provided prompts for discussion. And we can use clicker questions, synced up to Google Classroom to quickly assess understanding along the way. And I'll show you an example of what we mean for that. So if the clicker component isn't quite working through, so we envision that students would use their phones as a method of sort of inputting their questions to the larger Google Classroom. But if that's difficult to do, it's really easy for students to just show it on their hands in terms of which answer they would select. So I'll just quickly show you an example of what we mean by this in-class presentation guided discussion. So we would show students something like this here. So this is modified from a presentation that was made by Maureen Knapp from Simon Fraser University. So we would, as a class, go through a little bit of the background. So just once again, having gone through the story 3 times with the academic review article, with the online ESPN article, and again in class together, just to make sure we're all starting off with the same understanding, or roughly the same understanding, before going into the discussion. So we would briefly talk about the incident, how the Santhi, the athlete, was stripped of her medal. We would encourage questions like this. So how do you know if someone is male or female? We would get them to talk to someone next to you to identify maybe 5 characteristics that distinguish male from females. And again, this is sort of like a follow-up discussion to the discussion that they've had online already. And so we can continue on. We want to address some of those key terminology and concepts that we want the students to walk away from at the end of the lesson based on the expectations in the Ontario Ministry of Education curriculum document. So we want to identify terms like anatomy, physiology, chromosome, genes, and etc. And this is what we envision maybe our first click question would look like. So for example, we would ask students to imagine they're a member of the committee that decided whether the